Really? Like, what about general relativity? Doesn't that tell us something about the passage of time? Something that we never, ever would have just gotten by reasoning in a void? I mean, time entirely is of perception. It's how the perceptions are laid out in a series, and rather than, some weird thing of experiencing everything at once and, nothing changes because everything's happening at the same instant kind of concept. It's time is very much related to our perception. And again, that's physical time we found out. Subjective time, our sense of time, well, we know that is very much related to our perceptive ability. If you give somebody a drug and change their perceptive ability, you can change their sense of the passage of time. So how with pure reason? Pure reason has access to only your most subjective point of time. You want to get anything beyond this very, very variable concept of time that we have because of our biochemistry and get a more concrete physical version of time. Obviously, you have to go to science. You obviously have to go to perceptions and be very careful about your perceptions. Now, it is ironic that Einstein was able to use something akin to pure reason, a thought experiment, to figure out relativity. But of course, he didn't do that in a void, and he didn't do that without taking in input principles, and the input principles were based on perceptions, and specifically Galilean relativity, velocity relativity, which is based, of course, on a lot of sense experiences. In Einstein's case, from that you can deduce that if the speed of light is going to appear the same in every one of these reference frames, that something has to happen to make that correlate, and time, mass, and distance actually distort. So I think science can obviously address these questions. Now, what does it mean to exist? Well, empiricism, starting from the fact that we receive perceptions. Okay, we can talk about the philosophy of perceptions, and maybe you will reveal, more and more concepts that I rely on that you will call my metaphysics, and I will say, no, I have reason for my perceptions to believe them. But starting from perception in the sense that I have noticed in myself that when I do the Cartesian doubt exercise, I say I perceive, therefore I am. Okay, I don't know that I'm thinking. I don't know that I will. I don't know any of that stuff, but I do know that I perceive, and that means I exist. It doesn't mean I exist because of a metaphysical definition of existence. That is the definition of existence. My perceptive experience is what it means to exist for me. What does it mean for something else to exist is to be one of my perceptions. Now, we have these models that my perceptions are related to these external objects, so then what it means to exist, is to give me the perceptions that that appear to be material. Again, what is material? Okay, that is whatever it is causing the consistency of my perceptions. My expectation for consistency is not based on pure reason, it's based on millions of years of evolution, having evolved the brain in a world that does have consistency. So, in a way, I guess I reject that the starting point is nothingness in the void. I don't believe we get that starting point. If we were metaphysical creatures, in the theistic version of metaphysics, something like that might be possible. But we don't start at that point. By the time we are, cognating on these things, we have a brain and it's evolved. So that's our starting point. Our starting point is complex. It's perception, and perception implies a lot of things. You know, well, it implies just a very few very straightforward things we can all accept. But compared to starting from the void and trying to get ideas from nothing and work your way all the way up from that, no. I believe we start from perception, and that involves, perceptions. It involves time. It involves me as a subject. It involves experience. It even involves memory, because if we are perception processing, and beyond memory, it's somewhat arbitrary how much it's going to involve, because in the ontology there is perception and perception processing. So as we know, the brain's complex, and it does lots of kinds of processing and pattern recognition. And theoretically, you can tell me that in my ontology is everything about everything necessary about our brain chemistry, or rather how our brain chemistry works from our perspective. And that's unfortunate in terms of traditional philosophy. We want to get something even more fundamental, just a few very clear definitions, not definitions that rely on so many levels, ultimately of biochemistry and whatnot, to try to explain. But see, I just say that it's a practical necessity. I do start from the stream of perceptions. Now, when I want to explain, again, the stream of perceptions, I can't use metaphysics. There is no metaphysics below getting these perceptions. I have to use a model, a material model, that I build on top of my subjective perceptions of reality. So I'll end up explaining what you're calling the metaphysical principles as physical principles in the model. And it'll all be based on the assumption that I get perception so that I can process them. It's a very organic. I don't mean organic in a logical sense of organic. I mean organic in the sense of, squishy tissues, and, in reality, we are animals. We start our reasoning from being animals in the real world, and have to define the real world in terms of the information we get. We can't define the real world in terms of information that we can't get. That's why I say everything is empirical, because if I say that we have to get information, that's empirical, right? Metaphysics doesn't have to really be gotten. It's in there. You just listen or reason it out. You don't go get it from the real world. It's somehow just automatically gettable. And yet your mind only exists in the real world. So you do need the real world to get it, because there is no pure reason unless you have a brain and it's in the real world, right? Okay, now I know I've messed up a few things here, but they can be sorted out.